Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we turn a mountain of source material into the core knowledge you need to be, well, immediately well-informed.
That's the goal.
Today, we are dissecting the surprisingly scientific formula behind a successful charity auction. Our mission is to really analyze this critical, self-reinforcing relationship between attendance, event themes, and the bidding dynamics that follow.
Right.
So if your goal is maximizing impact, maximizing revenue at your next gala or benefit auction, then this deep dive is definitely for you. We're pulling tools and inspiration straight from sources that focus on optimizing these nonprofit events.
And we're looking for those crucial psychological levers, the things that turn what's just a pleasant evening into a major fundraising success.
Exactly. And because this material is so rich, we want to point you somewhere right at the top, the resource that really inspired this whole exploration.
It's a fantastic starting point.
It is. You can find educational videos and so much more detailed guidance on how to operate charity auctions just by visiting fundraising.Courses.com's charity auction page.
It really is essential if you want to apply these insights. And like you said, our objective today is to move beyond just, hosting a good party.
Right.
We want to understand the actual mechanisms, the cause and effect that create this upward spiral of engagement and sales. We're looking at the building blocks of a truly successful fundraising ecosystem.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start with the absolute fundamental: attendance. The sources make it undeniably clear.
Oh, it's huge.
It's monumental.
Yeah.
Charity auction attendance plays a massive role in success. And it's not just about volume, it's about the atmosphere that volume creates.
Yes. A larger audience just inherently translates into more energy, more excitement, and that excitement is basically the fuel you need for healthy competition.
So what's the why behind that? Why does a full room change the dynamic so much?
Well, that's what's so fascinating. It's not just that you have more, raw hands that can go up for a bid. It directly boosts competition, sure. But more importantly, it increases the perceived value of the items.
The desirability.
The desirability, exactly. Think about social proof. You walk into a room, it's crowded, it's bustling, everyone seems genuinely excited. That energy validates the cause. It signals that the things being sold are highly coveted.
It creates a buzz.
A palpable buzz. And that participation from a lively, spirited crowd puts guests into a very specific emotional space. The sources call it a festive and giving mood.
I like that phrase.
It's perfect, right? You're no longer just, buying a thing. You're participating in this communal, exciting event for a cause you care about. And that mood, that is where the financial breakthrough happens.
That makes so much sense. That shared excitement really shifts the focus from a simple transaction to, high-stakes participation. And the end goal, the absolute best-case scenario for revenue, is getting that critical mass where a real bidding war breaks out.
A visible one.
A visible one, yes.
Yeah.
And logically, the more people you have in that room, the statistically higher the chance you'll see one of those battles that just drives prices way beyond the market value.
And that takes us right into the psychological mechanism that really props this all up. When a bidding competition starts, especially for a really desired item, it's thrilling for the people involved.
Of course.
But it's also a very public way for that bidder to show how much they care about the organization. It becomes a statement.
A statement of commitment, of affinity.
Yes. And that emotional intensity is what allows a bidder to justify going over their own budget. They're not just buying a luxury item anymore. They're winning recognition, they're showing deep support, and they're taking home this thing that everybody else in the room wanted.
So that psychological justification can push them to spend significantly more.
Significantly more, all to secure that win and make that public statement.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. The dynamic effect. Once that competition gets going, the winner-take-all nature of the auction just kicks in and starts to ripple outwards. Let's use a quick example from the material. Say the first big item, item A, a week at a beach house. Expected value is, say, $5,000.
Okay.
But then two bidders get locked in this thrilling, visible back and forth, and the item sells for $10,000. Those early results just automatically inject a sense of prestige into the whole event.
Precisely. Those first few items, by selling high, they set a new market price right there in the room. And since bids are announced loudly by an auctioneer or they're visible on a screen, that prestige encourages everybody else watching to sort of adjust their own mental ceiling for the next items.
So it creates a ripple effect.
A huge one. It increases the perceived value of item B, C, and D that haven't even been auctioned yet. If the first couple of items go for double what was expected,
Hmm.
suddenly everyone, the seller, every potential bidder, becomes more optimistic. They're psychologically prepared for higher prices on everything else.
That dynamic just creates this crescendo of excitement and expectation across the whole room. It's incredibly powerful.
It is.
But we have to pause here for a nuanced check. The sources brought this up. We've been making the case for big crowds, but there is a note about, and I'm quoting here, one disadvantage of large crowds at your nonprofit auction. We can't just ignore the flip side.
No, and this is a critical point. This is what separates a good event from an optimized one. While attendance drives competition, an excessively large crowd can create logistical friction.
And that sabotages the whole mood.
It completely sabotages it. If the room is so packed that guests feel anxious or uncomfortable, if the lines for drinks are ridiculously long, if the sound is bad, it just disrupts all engagement.
And I imagine not everyone in a huge crowd is a serious bidder.
That's the other part of it. If a big portion of your crowd is just there to socialize, but they have no real philanthropic capacity or interest in the auction items, then they're just noise. They dilute the percentage of high-capacity bidders you need for that dynamic effect.
So it's not just about raw numbers. It's about a large crowd of engaged, qualified participants.
Absolutely. Which turns the whole planning process into a much more targeted effort.
Okay, so that leads us to the proactive side of things. How do you strategically get the right people and enough of them to show up in the first place? The sources point to one key driver,
The theme.
the theme. It sounds so simple, but the strategy is actually really deep. The sources talk about two main categories of themes. First, you have what they call the silly themes.
Right, the ones that are totally unconnected to the mission.
Exactly, like a holiday movies theme or something like that.
Yeah.
Then you have the serious themes, which are directly tied to your purpose, like a school foundation, choosing education for all.
And each one serves a different purpose. The serious, mission-driven theme that reinforces your core message. It makes sure the people who show up are primarily invested in the cause.
And the silly ones.
The sillier, disconnected themes are about pure fun. They prioritize a night of novelty and socializing, and that can actually draw in a wider, more varied crowd people who might be new to your organization. It expands your donor funnel.
The benefit of picking the right theme is just. It's transformative. It makes the auction more exciting, yes, but more importantly, it makes it memorable.
Memorable is the key word.
It is. Whether it's a glamorous black tie thing or a funky laid-back evening, the theme gives it a cohesive, enjoyable experience. And then guests are more likely to talk about it later, remember it fondly,
And come back next year, which guarantees that sustained attendance you need.
the sources gave some fantastic examples to illustrate the variety here.
They really did. For that elegant high roller feel, they mention Havana Nights. You immediately think of high-style cocktails.
Right. And for a school auction, they suggested Le Cirque for a sort of whimsical sophistication.
But they're not all about glamour. We also saw historical themes, like a 1930s-themed nonprofit auction, or that fun throwback sock hop, the 1950s theme. Those are so easy for guests to get into, it just lowers the barrier to having fun.
And if you want high energy and family-friendly, you could go with a carnival theme, like country fair or carnival for a cause.
Yeah.
It just proves the theme is the structural invitation. It's the first piece of the puzzle that starts that whole attendance bidding cycle.
And we have to remember, it's a unified cycle. Attendance, theme, bidding. They aren't three separate things to plan. They're one feedback loop that, when you get it right, leads straight to better awareness, more engagement, and ultimately more money for your mission.
There's a quick note on presentation here, too, before we move on. The sources really stress the importance of consistent branding.
Oh, that's vital.
If you want people to anticipate and remember your event every year, branding your gala with a consistent, recognizable name is absolutely key for that institutional memory and getting people to just automatically sign up.
Okay, so let's broaden this out a bit. Let's get into the nuts and bolts, the operational details, the logistical levels that influence all of this. These have to work perfectly to support the dynamic we've been talking about.
Venue and timing. Those are huge strategic factors. On the venue side, the sources suggested using your location to connect with, desirable demographics or even local celebrities.
Using the venue itself as a draw.
Exactly. And we also saw compelling reasons why a foundation might change its venue every year, like a hospital foundation that moves its auction annually. It's not just random. It's a strategy to refresh the event's appeal, signal growth.
And tap into new networks or just provide a new experience for your loyal attendees.
And for real novelty, the suggestion of using unusual venues like an airplane hangar, that creates an immediate memorable impact.
Timing is just as critical, and this is where the sources get really smart. They ask, are fall charity auction dates better than spring dates?
Right, and it's not about the weather.
It's not about the weather at all. It's about looking at the local philanthropic calendar. You have to avoid direct competition. You can't schedule your big event when another major gala is competing for your donors' time and, frankly, their wallet share.
And then you get into even more specific demographic and logistical things. The sources note that age can be a factor in your gala's start time.
Younger professionals might need an early arrival incentive to make sure they show up before that evening fatigue sets in.
That's a great point. And there's also a focus on cultivating future support. The need to actively think about encouraging youth to attend your benefit auction. They are the donors of tomorrow.
Absolutely. And their presence adds a different kind of energy to the room, which brings up that interesting question they posed. Are men or women better guests at your benefit auction? Who to invite?
Which isn't about preference at all.
No, it's about invitation strategy. You need to make sure key decision makers attend together. That often means inviting couples, inviting families to maximize the available budget in the room and make sure both parties are there to get caught up in that competitive giving mood.
But I think the single most repeated logistical point in all the source material, which shows you just how critical it is the need for smooth, invisible execution.
Yes.
Specifically, setting up smooth check-in and check-out.
You cannot overstate that. After you've spent months building the perfect theme, getting the right guest list, fostering that festive mood, the absolute last thing you want is a clunky check-in that creates a huge line at the start.
Or a frustratingly slow checkout at the end of the night.
Right. If those moments are difficult, you risk just deflating all the goodwill and energy you worked so hard to create. Logistical perfection is essential to protect the psychological investment of every single guest.
And that attention to detail, both during the event and after, is key. To tie it all together, the sources also included tips for sustained engagement after the night is over.
Right, the follow-up.
They outlined 5 ways to maintain engagement after an event, which reminds us that the auction is a catalyst for a relationship, not the end of it.
So to synthesize this entire formula for you listening, success in a charity auction is really an engineered ecosystem. Your theme draws the right people. Those people drive visible competition, and that competition maximizes the financial outcome.
The whole goal is to create this highly attended, memorable event where the excitement of that visible bidding creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of high sales and hopefully long-term donor loyalty.
That's it in a nutshell.
That comprehensive synthesis brings us to our final provocative thought for you to think about as you plan your next event. If the psychology of visible bidding and prestige is so powerful, and we know that early results set the tone for the entire night,
That's interesting.
how can you use that knowledge to intentionally pre-plan your auction item order? Could you place a high-value, highly coveted item very early on, maybe even the second or third lot, to intentionally spark that dynamic effect and inflate the excitement and perceived value of every single item that comes after it?
A really interesting thought to end on.
That is the deep dive for today. And as a final reminder, to find those educational videos and much more comprehensive insights on operating charity auctions, be sure to visit fundraisingcourses.com's charity auction page.